Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker and welcome to the 7th episode of my Let's Roll series, which focuses on the generation and progression of each core BECMI Dungeons and Dragons character class. If you don't know what BECMI is, I strongly recommend you watch my BECMI playlist, link on the screen, where I dive into many aspects of the game and make the case for why I think it's the greatest version of the Dungeons and Dragons game. Before I continue with exploring the generation of a BECMI Halfling, I also recommend those unfamiliar with BECMI to watch the previous episodes in this series, especially the fighter, as some of the mechanics mentioned here are explained in more depth in that video, specifically the fighter combat options, which a Halfling has access to. Also, I just want to acknowledge that there will be quite a bit of repetition in this video regarding demi-humans, as many of the mechanics here have been raised in the videos on the dwarf and the elf. Of course, I'm assuming you've watched those first. As I roll up a Halfling, I will explore the character class as presented in the Rules Cyclopedia, released in 1991. Once generated, we will go up the levels to examine how the class has progressed and what's changed. As I'm using the Rules Cyclopedia, I will be including the skills rules and the weapon mastery rules. Today we're looking at generating the 7th character class we come across in the rules, and that is the Halfling. The Halfling is the third and final of 3 demi-human classes available to play in the core BECMI Dungeons and Dragons rules. We are told that demi-humans are referred to as such because they are similar to humans. In addition, we are told that demi-human characters are less common than human ones, due to them being reclusive and mysterious, so quite a different take on playing a non-human character in later editions of the game. Indeed, if you followed the rules as written, being able to play a demi-human could be quite difficult, because one must roll 3d6 for each ability score in order. Combining this with the fact that demi-humans have a minimum requirement for certain ability scores, then you could only play a demi-human if you satisfy these requirements. Of course, this was heavily house-ruled even back in the day, because people wanted to choose what they wanted to play. However, this had the effect of making demi-humans less mysterious and more common as adventurers. What I need to mention here is that the playing of a demi-human in BECMI uses the race as class system, meaning that if you play a Halfling, then that is your class. You cannot be a Halfling thief or a Halfling magic user. You may only be a Halfling. This mechanic has come in for a lot of criticism and is one of the key reasons that this edition of D&D has suffered from the moniker of basic, when Advanced Dungeons and Dragons has less limitations in this regard. But the best defense of race as class as a system that I've come across is that demi-humans are pretty much alien to human. They do not conceive things in the same way or share the human worldview. So whilst such a lack of diversity of options might seem restrictive to humans, to demi-humans it's just the way it's always been. That said, as BECMI developed, options to expand beyond the rules as written to offer demi-humans some variety were also developed. The most notable of these are within the Gazetteer series, and there's a great option to become a kind of Halfling Druid in the Gazetteer centering on this race. But we're dealing with the core rules here, so let's get back to rolling a Halfling. The Halfling is the shortest of the demi-humans, looking almost childlike and standing at around 3 feet tall. Halflings have a penchant for home comforts and security, so one of their main motivations for adventure is to acquire treasures that enable this kind of lifestyle amongst their favoured rolling hills. Halflings live in communities called shires overseen by sheriffs. Like dwarves, Halflings are good fighters, although they may only use small weapons, and they are highly resistant to magic. In fact, if you wanted to look at the class in a purely mechanical way, Halflings are basically a fighter with better saving throws, with some special abilities added in. This means Halflings have access to some of the same special fighting options at first level that fighters do, such as setting a spear to receive a charge, but they do not gain the ability to use a lance from horseback, although if you wanted Halflings to have this option using smaller lances, then it's not exactly game-breaking to implement it. Halflings gain more combat options on achieving 900,000 experience points. Why have I phrased it like this? Well, it's because Halflings may only achieve a maximum of 8th level, although they may rise up in what's called attack ranks beyond this, gaining some attack options and resistances, but not gaining any more hit points or saving throw improvements. That said, they are limited in the amount of attack ranks they may obtain compared to both the dwarf and the elf. There are variant rules in the Rules Cyclopedia that allow for doing away with this maximum level rule, but for the purpose of this video, I'm sticking to the core rules. High-level Halflings have the potential to become extremely resistant to both magic, like a dwarf, and breath weapons, like an elf, automatically taking half damage and only taking quarter damage on a successful save. The reason why Halflings are limited to 8th level is down to their special abilities. We are told that Halflings are woodland folk and have an uncanny knack of hiding in that environment, which can also help them in urban or interior areas, although not as well. In addition, halflings gain a number of innate combat bonuses. I'll cover these a bit later in the video. Halflings are organised socially into clans, and at the centre of each clan is their halfling relic, the Crucible of Black Flame. Well, that's the basics of a halfling when starting at first level, so let's roll! Here's the front half of my character sheet. Let's stick the important information about a halfling on the right here, so that we can refer to it as needed. Moving on, I must first ensure that my rolls allow me to be a halfling in the first place, so my character's dexterity and constitution scores must be 9 or above. We are told that a halfling has 2 prime requisite scores, which can enable this character to gain experience point bonuses. These are strength and dexterity, so I would like my scores to be the highest in these to maximise the amount of experience points my character earns, as well as to ensure my halfling is effective in combat. As stated here in the text I have highlighted, a halfling gets a 5% experience point bonus if either their strength or dexterity is 13 or above. However, should both be 13 or above, then the bonus is 10%. Right, let's put the Dungeon Master's name here, and the class and level we're going to demonstrate. As we're looking at a halfling today, we can assume that the scores I rolled favoured that class, like so. Okay, so now it's time to work out the bonus or penalty adjustment for each ability score. Let's get that chart on the screen. Okay, so I get a +1 adjustment for my strength, but the adjustment for my intelligence and wisdom is 0. I get a +2 for my dexterity, and a +1 for my constitution. Both of these will come in handy in combat, as dexterity will help me avoid attacks, and constitution will increase my hit points. As for charisma, I get no adjustment here. My character certainly doesn't want to be the centre of attention, preferring to hide from problems until the right time to make an appearance. Each of these adjustments will affect my character's interaction with the world, as described by the highlighted text. We won't get too much into these unless they specifically impact my halfling's generation, but I will immediately change my halfling's armour class, as that dexterity score of 16 will reduce it, which is a good thing, from a natural armour class of 9 to 7. Right, so my halfling is shaping up nicely, but how many hit points do they start with? Well, looking at the information in my table, a halfling's hit dice is 1d6. Going strictly by the BECMI rules, a character does not always get maximum hit points at first level, so I roll my 1d6 and get a 3. I add 1 to this roll because of my constitution adjustment, making my actual hit point total 4, as shown in the hit points box. The next thing I need to do is add my halfling's saving throw scores to this sheet. In BECMI, saving throw scores are determined by class, as shown on this table, so all we need to do is transfer the numbers for level 1 onto my sheet. So Death Ray or Poison is 8, Magic Wands is 9, Paralysis or Turn to Stone is 10, Dragon Breath is 13, and Rod, Staff or Spell is 12. So if you've been working your way through this Let's Roll series, you can see that a halfling's saving throw scores are significantly lower than most of the other classes at first level, but are the same as a dwarf's. I think the design intent here was to lean into the way hobbits, which halflings are obviously based on, were quite resilient in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but what do you think? Let's now turn to languages. As mentioned in my previous Let's Roll videos, each character starts with at least some understanding of what's referred to as the common tongue. As you can see on this languages table, due to my halfling having an intelligence of 9, they have just 2 languages. The first of these will be common, and the second will be my halfling's alignment tongue, which I will elect to be neutral. Unlike the dwarf and the elf, halflings do not begin the game with any extra languages. Interestingly, there is no text in the rules cyclopedia offering halflings the ability to use their own language as a class ability. We are given this information for both elves and dwarves, but it's absent for halflings, probably because the class gains no extra languages on top. I would judge this to be an error, and add halfling to their language list, and will include it on the sheet here, as well as my halfling's alignment of neutral. Right, so my halfling is almost there in terms of this front half of the sheet. The combat section at the bottom is the same for all starting character classes, and just relates to the number needed to hit a particular armor class. But my halfling has a +1 strength adjustment to hit in melee combat, and a +2 adjustment to hit with missile weapons. Let's amend this hit roll table to account for this. Of course, these numbers may be further impacted by magic or weapon mastery adjustments, but also my halfling's combat bonuses, which we'll look at shortly. But for now, let's give my halfling a name. Let's use the one from the basic red box when introducing new players to this class, and call this halfling Touchbury. I can't tell you how many times my adolescent group laughed at that one. we'll put this name together with Jeff Easley's portrait offered in that set. There you go, meet Touchbury. He looks a little startled to be here, and that's because he's actually a little touched in the head. He never really plans anything, and usually goes along with whatever the group is doing, as long as it's not too deviant. This kind of fast and loose approach has been difficult to deal with by his family and clan, hence them changing his name from just Berry to Touchbury. So we're going to call him Touchbury the Unhinged. If you were faced with a stare like that from a 3-foot sword-wielding hobbit, I think unhinged would be exactly the word that would come to mind. Okay, Touchbury the Unhinged is shaping up to be an interesting halfling, so it's time to turn over the sheet and insert some further details. Specifically, information regarding Touchbury's halfling abilities, skill choices, and weapon mastery details. Let's first look at halfling abilities. As I mentioned earlier, all halflings gain access to fighter combat options, and at first level this only includes set spear versus a charge, as, according to the rules as written, lance attack is not available to halflings. In order to avoid too much duplication in these videos, I won't repeat the detail of this manoeuvre here, but I do a deep dive into this and other manoeuvres in my Let's Roll a Fighter video, so check that out if you haven't already. Staying with combat for the moment, halflings receive class-specific combat bonuses when faced with certain conditions, so they receive a -2 bonus to armor class when faced with larger than man-sized attackers. The rules cyclopedia also states that a non-human shaped creature of 4 hit dice or more can also be presumed to be greater than man-sized, so this is a decent ability. Additionally, halflings always get a +1 bonus to their attack rolls when using missile weapons, again a great ability. Finally, they get a +1 to their initiative when using the individual initiative method instead of group initiative. This can be a bit of a limited bonus if always using group initiative, but there may be opportunities to use it when facing opponents alone, although I'm not sure facing opponents alone should be termed an opportunity. Halflings also have something called Woodland Abilities, although this really refers to one ability relating to hiding in the woods, but which is also available to a halfling hiding indoors, but to a lesser extent. When a halfling is in a woodland environment, such as a forest, but I would also count a jungle or even a bit of shrubland, a halfling gains a whopping 90% chance to hide. A thief doesn't get a 90% chance to hide until 31st level, but a halfling gets this ability at 1st level, although it does have its limitations, which I'll come on to. This hiding ability may also be used indoors, such as buildings or dungeons, if there are sufficient shadows to hide in. However, the chance of success reduces down to 33%, presumably because exterior woodland is much more favourable to this halfling's ability. For attempts in both kinds of environments, a halfling must remain completely motionless, so this is a crucial difference from a thief, who is also able to try to move silently whilst hiding. We are told that bright light may ruin an attempt to hide indoors, presumably due to there being no shadows. However, no such reference to illumination is given when using this ability in woodland. Therefore, it seems that halflings can make themselves appear as part of the woodland if they remain absolutely motionless, regardless of the time of day. We'll come back to these abilities later, as Touchbury gains more fighter combat options beyond 8th level. For now, let's move on to skills. Each character starts with a minimum of 4 skills plus a character's intelligence adjustment. Touchbury's intelligence adjustment is 0, so he starts with the standard 4. An extra slot is gained at 5th level, and then is dependent on how many experience points the halfling has as he climbs beyond 8th level. We'll see how this plays out as Touchbury develops. In the meantime, he chooses alertness, blind shooting, singing, and storytelling. You can take the halfling out of the Shire, but you can't take the Shire out of the halfling. As you can see, I've recorded these skills on the sheet, along with their relevant ability score values, which must be rolled equal to or under to succeed in a skill check. Okay, now it's time to jump into weapon mastery. Weapon mastery acquisition is a little different for demi-humans compared to humans. We are told that demi-humans have a basic knowledge of all weapons from 1st level, meaning they are not treated as being unskilled in any weapon. This is due to their longer lifespans and wilderness-oriented lifestyles. However, demi-humans may attempt to gain weapon mastery of any weapon they have a basic knowledge of, and for a halfling this would be at 4th and 8th levels, as shown in this table. In addition, halflings can continue to accumulate weapon mastery knowledge beyond their maximum level by getting one more attempt for every 200,000 experience points beyond their maximum level. This becomes quite significant, as we'll see later. As he is only 1st level, and to keep things simple, I will only enter the weapons Touchbury is carrying, rather than listing every weapon he has a basic mastery of. Touchy likes to take advantage of his missile combat abilities, so he carries a short bow along with a short sword and a dagger. We'll record these in the weapon mastery section, along with the stats associated with just having a basic skill in them. I'm not going to delve into equipping my character or determining their wealth, as it won't really add to the information I'm trying to relay here. So this is Touchy the Unhinged, our first level halfling. Touchy began his adventuring career with a human fighter called Fleetwood, delving into dungeons and pits of despair that, perhaps, he wasn't just suited to. Unfortunately, Fleetwood turned out to be a despicable fellow, a fact Touchy only realised too late, leaving him with a permanently haunted look on his face and the occasional nervous twitch. His family are less than sympathetic and blame him going on all those adventures with the big folk. Touchy didn't take their advice and has dogged Fleetwood's footsteps all through his later adventuring career. He currently has 3 million experience points and an attack rank of K, and sits at the Hunting Hin in Wearscalot in the Five Shires, staring at the bottom of his glass and wishing the drinks came in human pints. Fleetwood got away from him again, and it might be time to ask for help from his old crew. So before Touchy leaves the Hunting Hin, let's have a look at his character sheet to see what's changed. First, let's look at his saving throws. As Touchy is now 8th level, we can refer to the correct numbers on this table and copy them to the sheet, like so. One thing to remember here is that halfling saving throws do not improve past 8th level, so this is as good as it's going to get for Touchy. That said, a human character has to wait until at least past 20th level to get anywhere near these kind of scores, so the resistances of a halfling really shine through here, even compared to a dwarf at 8th level, although a dwarf does edge them out by the time they reach 12th level. Okay, so let's move on to the hit roll chart. We'll consult the numbers appropriate to Touchy's level and update them on the sheet. What you must understand here is that demi-humans use the fighter attack rolls up to their maximum level. The DH column here referring to demi-humans is their progression beyond maximum level and into their attack ranks. Touchy is 8th level with the maximum halfling attack rank of K, which is 2 attack ranks less than the maximum available to dwarves and elves. So his Thaco becomes the equivalent of a 22nd level fighter, and drops to 4 for melee combat and 3 for missile combat when taking his ability adjustments into consideration. If a halfling could progress to attack rank M, this would have been 2 on both counts, so here we find a deliberate restriction in their fighting ability, although if I'm honest, it's negligible. Also, you will notice that there is a dagger symbol next to some of these numbers. This just means that this amount is added to the damage of an attack if a natural 1 is not rolled. Let's transfer these numbers onto the character sheet, like so. The last thing we need to update on this part of the character sheet is Touchy's hit points by consulting the halfling's hit dice information again. As you can see, Touchy gets 1d6 hit points per level, up to 8th level, and he may apply his constitution adjustment to this total. However, he receives no more hit points after this. So where every other character class gets 9 hit dice, the halfling only receives 8. In addition, they lose out on 1 level of constitution bonus to hit points and gain no more increases. I roll 7d6 for Touchy and get 32, adding another 7 for 7 levels worth of constitution adjustments, getting a total of 39. I add the 4 hit points Touchy had at 1st level to make a grand total of 43 hit points at 8th level. What's key to remember here is halflings cannot gain any more levels past 8th, so this total of 43 hit points is it for Touchy. He will not gain any more for the rest of his career, barring some very powerful magic or a wish that might adjust his constitution score. So again we're confronted with a matter of balance. For all the resistances and abilities a halfling might have, a human class continues to gain hit points right up to the maximum of 36 level. That's a big difference. Plus, a player would need to consider whether they would prefer more resistance, meaning less likelihood of taking damage, or more hit points to absorb damage, should it occur. There is also the obvious point that you may not play up to 36 level anyway. The choice is, of course, yours. Regardless, Touchy now has 43 hit points, and we'll add them to the sheet, here. Now let's turn the character sheet over again and update the items there. The first thing I'm going to have to do is reduce the font size, as there's quite a bit of information to fit in. Let's focus on Touchy's fighter combat options. At attack rank D, Touchy gained 4 more fighter combat options. What's interesting to note is that a halfling requires 240,000 more XP than a 12th level dwarf to receive these options, and 50,000 more XP than a 10th level elf. So here we come across clear efforts at balancing the demi-human classes. These fighter combat options are Disarm, Parry, Smash, and Multiple Attacks, which I've recorded on the sheet. I won't go into the detail of these combat options in this video, as I already go into them in some depth in my Let's Roll a Fighter video, so I'm going to recommend once again that you check that out if you haven't already. Otherwise, it's worth stating here that, due to being a halfling, Touchy may not use the disarm action on any creature with the giant or gargantuan description, but as with all things in BECMI, it's up to the DM. Like I mentioned in the dwarf video when discussing this restriction, there are some pretty big things that even a human shouldn't be able to disarm. In respect of gaining multiple attacks, a halfling may only have a maximum of 3 attacks per round, as opposed to a maximum of 4 attacks per round that a fighter might have. Touchy gained a 3rd attack per round when he obtained his maximum attack rank of K. Again, what's interesting to note is that halflings require 800,000 experience points more than a dwarf to get 3 attacks per round, and 400,000 experience points more than an elf. In addition to these fighter combat options, at attack rank B, Touchy's halfling resistances improved to mean that he now only receives half damage from spells and spell-like effects, or quarter damage on a successful save. His resistances improved again at attack rank H, when Touchy gained the ability to only take half damage from breath weapons, or quarter damage on a successful save. So in effect, the halfling gains both the dwarf's resistance to spells and the elf's resistance to breath weapons at high levels. These resistances should come in handy when trying to protect Touchy's limited hit point total. I've noted this information on the sheet, so now we'll move on to skills. Touchy gains another skill at 5th level, another at 300,000 experience points, another at 1,500,000 experience points due to gaining a further 1,200,000 experience points as you can see on the table here, and another at 2,700,000. With Touchy's current XP total at attack rank K being 3 million, he will gain another skill slot after obtaining a further 900,000 experience points. But for now, we have 4 more skill slots to add to Touchy's character sheet. For these I will choose Acrobatics, Detect Deception, Intimidation, and Riding Pegasi. He picked one up on a holiday in Earendi. If you've been watching my previous videos, you will see clearly that demi-humans do not obtain skills at the same level as humans, which in my opinion demonstrates human versatility and dominance. Touchy has just 8 skill slots with 3 million XP. A fighter or thief with the same intelligence and XP would have 11 by that time. Let's move on to weapon mastery. So according to this table, Touchy had 2 weapon mastery attempts by the time he reached 8th level, which required 120,000 experience points, and he gained an extra level of mastery for every 200,000 experience points after that, up to his current 3 million, which is another 14 attempts, meaning a total of 16 weapon mastery attempts we need to account for. Wow, if I ever have a character looking for a weapon master to teach him some skills, I'm gonna go looking for some hobbits. Touchy has 3 weapons listed here, which for simplicity's sake I'm going to say remain his favourite. So that will use up 12 attempts in getting to Grandmaster in each, and I'm going to add a light crossbow to this list, so that he may benefit from its stun ability as needed. The fact that, as a demi-human, Touchy does not need to spend an attempt on gaining basic mastery is of real benefit here. So he only needs his remaining 4 slots, rather than 5, to gain a further Grand Mastery. For more information on what all these numbers mean, then I go into weapon mastery in more detail in my video on the master rules, link on the screen and in the description. So with that final update, we have finished rolling up a halfling. So meet Touchy the Unhinged, an 8th level attack rank K, slightly demented halfling of the 5 Shires. He may be staring at the bottom of an empty glass for now, but he has big plans for taking down the guy that screwed him up. Based on these stats though, he's definitely going to need some help. See my fighter video for reasons why. Well, that's been the 3rd episode of Let's Roll looking at a demi-human class. Generating this halfling was an interesting exercise. I have to admit, halflings were never my favourite class, and I still can't decide whether their combat bonuses are worth it for their restriction in levels. What do you think? It would be great to learn your own experiences of a BECMI halfling and how you think the class holds up, especially given its restriction to 8th level. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this 7th episode of Let's Roll. Please give it a like if you did indeed like it, and please hit the subscribe button if I've earned your future attention. If you'd like to thank me further, you can by buying me a coffee, link on the screen or in the description. Otherwise, I'm BECMI Berserker. Keep making your saving throws, and I hope to see you back here soon.